So, a quote from the book Eugenics and Other Evils. The wisest thing in the world is to cry out before you are hurt. It is no good to cry out after you are hurt, especially after you are mortally hurt. People talk about the impatience of the populace, but sound historians know that most tyrannies have been possible because men move too late. It is often essential to resist a tyranny before it exists. It is no answer to say, with a distant optimism, that the scheme is only in the air. A blow from a hatchet can only be parried while in the air. Alright, the moral gray zone. Um, out of context, it makes sense to stop a mortal evil, like obvious, unambiguous moments like child endangerment. We would obviously try to stop someone for self defense reasons at the individual level, but it becomes far more complicated at the societal level. Um, Sane people with good intentions would rather one die to save 10,000, obviously, in a trolley experiment. If you ask them randomly, they would have no context what you were saying, but um, this trolley thing, this intuition is an illusion to some level. It's merely a cold emotional logic that only becomes apparent after the fact. Depending on the spectrum of acting and not acting, and even activists putting things into use or praxis, if you will, um, like say acknowledging ending an enemy is the right way, but to a large degree in industrial society there is multiple safety nets and institutions that would patch up the wound of the activist or crazy terrorist, like Ted Kaczynski and um yeah, forgot where I was. Um the only way to destabilize is usually on a legal basis, policy making and or the military, even police, the arms and legs of the government who can dictate the emotional opinions of the populace as well. Um, so illegal acts to destabilize might not work because of the overall lack of support and the lack of morale mixed with the good the good people that aren't noticed as much in the psychotic situation. All right. The cold logic of an activist just isn't a good context because you can't take one piece out waiting for it to collapse in terms of people in line that could be replaced, like a vice president, uh, for example. Now, there was this disturbing example I once heard where somebody goes up to a Native American person, virtue signaling about how much they feel bad about how much they were genocided, and says, why don't you take revenge by doing this? You know, but this American person likely knows they have to go through the legal steps gradually. Uh, we likely we like to think we could stop a tyrant, um, but it's a complete moral gray zone of action. There has been people, there have been people who make hypothetical claims of stopping a tyrant by their source, the voters, followers, minions, whatever they're framed as, or the propaganda of what they're being fed. This is probably a slippery slope argument, obviously, because nobody wants to be authoritarianly cracked down on. Like, this is not good for the greater all well being of voter rights. So, yeah. But this argument should not be framed by law, but by moral frameworks that necessarily aren't going to be answered by sane people who see the hatchet, but and they film the hatchet, they potentially platform the hatchet for evidence, and for transparency. But when to duck is the answer, right? Well, the coup we saw was a very disturbing situation because of the vague terms and requests the right have. We all know what they want, but we can't really say necessarily. We all know though. Anyways, um, you know, their imaginary QAnon and their a talk of like killing politicians, which is nuts. And you have neo Nazis like Nick Fuentes, who amongst them were claimed he didn't go in, but he told his followers that you know you break your phones once you're in. But Nick Fuentes never got arrested. It never really seemed like he was accountable for his actions. It was kind of just like let off the hook. Um, but we all know if like misplaced leftists and liberals did this, you know, the authorities would go out of their way frothing to shoot a black or brown person, you know, but they're not going to do it for neo-Nazis and like crazy QAnoners. So the main reason leftists and liberals would most likely not do this is not because of the law, but for pragmatism and respect for people who, down the line, if like institutions are taken down, would harm a greater amount of people than who are harmed at the Capitol or are harmed in their groups. And they know that things need to be taken slowly. At least, unfortunately, things have to be taken gradually. Even though I personally think that with the climate thing, a lot of steps need to be made, like whoosh, but it can't be made by killing people. It can't be made by, you know, being mad at each other. Of course, anger is bound to happen. And we know the biases are on the side, are against the liberals and leftists to some level. You know, I was really surprised when that happened, how almost chill they were towards them. Like, I know some people got arrested for doing that, but it's crazy how much leeway it seemed that they got.